Brought to you by Penguin.
Hiding in Plain Sight. Written by Susan Lewis and read by Julia Franklin. She'd dreamt about nothing else for years. That was when she'd been able to dream. Now, here he was, standing in front of her, shaking so hard she'd surely have been able to hear his knees knocking if the wind weren't so fierce. His once handsome, now dissolute face was a white, stricken moon in the dark night. His hair was tossing around like trapped straw in a gale. He'd have run if he could, but the men either side of him, nameless, faceless, and handsomely paid, were preventing it. They were watching her, too. Neither of them spoke. They were silent, solid, knew why they were there, knew that after, they must silently disappear. A fleeting memory of little Michelle Cross on a busy street flashed into her mind, and was gone. She'd been there 1 minute, gone the next, to the arms of the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary. She could see he was shouting, crying, begging, but the wind was snatching his words away, hurling them like feathers into the stormy night. The cliff edge was so close. 100 feet below, the sea was a foaming, furious black mass, heaving colossal waves onto the slick, jagged rocks. She wondered if he'd ever dreamt about her. Had she troubled his mind at all, since he'd last seen her? She knew she must have. How'd he felt? Guilty? Afraid? Vulnerable? Certainly not as terrified as he felt now. He'd no doubt hoped he'd never see her again. But here she was, standing before him on this deserted tourist spot at the edge of the world. And he knew why. What he didn't know yet was whether she was going to let him live or die. Chapter 1. These meandering cobbled streets in the heart of Provence, laced through with sleepy canals and narrow filigree footbridges, were known as the Venice of France. Surrounded by the River Sorgue, with glittering waterways, tree-lined banks, and many splendid mossy mill wheels, the area was home to a whole host of pavement and waterfront cafes, along with antique shops of every period and description. It was through one of the leafy arcades that Andee Lawrence, was strolling, aware of the ghosts she couldn't see, but sense. Children, old women, thieves, sociopaths, philanthropists, spurned lovers, victims of grisly murders. Their spirits were as light and intangible as the wispy clouds overhead, their stories embedded in a forgotten time. Andee Lawrence wasn't French, but, with her effortless elegance and dark, compelling looks, she could easily have passed for a wealthy Parisienne, here to while away a few hours before other demands claimed her. In fact, she was a British ex-detective turned occasional freelance investigator who'd lately developed an interest in, and talent for, interior design. She was also the mother of 2, Luke, aged 21, and Elena, 19. She was separated from her husband, Martin, and was now enjoying a new relationship with antique dealer and property developer Graham Ogilvy, who'd brought her to France. Other than her striking looks, there was nothing to set her apart from the other browsers who'd come to l'Île-sur-la-Sorgue today. Not a Sunday in the middle of summer, but a Wednesday in early June. Sundays were crazy days, when hundreds, thousands of stalls cluttered the streets, and eager bargain hunters, tourists and vendors, outnumbered even the ghosts of former times. No one, least of all Andee, was aware of fate trailing her today like a sinister bridesmaid. She was experiencing no sixth sense.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?